Yo, it's your man with the plan, Marcelars here to talk about something a little bit new. For many of those who don't know me or know my channel, I am a big jrpg fan, and just RPGs in general, and because of the situation the world's in and the grace of the quarantine, I've had a lot more time to play a lot more games. And one of the games that the internet has suggested me time and time again was the Trials of Cold Steel series. And there's a funny story behind this. I always saw the Trials of Cold Steel series, but I've never played them because I felt, even though people kept on recommending him to me, they kept on giving me a chance, they were like, please play this game, Marks, please play this game, please play this game. I just felt, whenever I watched the trailers, I never felt that hype about it. And the funny thing is that I'm pretty good at like 90% of the time at knowing what games I like. So I was like, I always just put it off. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this game series. I heard it's really long, a lot of other stuff, like even longer than Persona because the story's in several different games. But somebody online they were like, okay, they gave me the rundown. They were like, if you like the Kingdom Hearts series, and the way the stories, like the way it's structured, not like the storytelling or anything, but you just like the Kingdom Hearts series, and just how it's structured and how the stories go and how long-winded the story is, and different small details make a big impact. You're going to really like this series, and just the way the story unfolds is like Kingdom Hearts, but it's not confusing at all. Unlike Kingdom Hearts, it's not confusing at all. And I was like, okay, I'll try this game out. So it's basically my friend was like, it's turn-based Kingdom Hearts. And I was like, okay, I'll try it out. So I tried it out. I tried out 1 and 2, and I'm on the 3rd one as I'm making this video. And just to let you guys know, this video is not scripted. This is not some review. This is just a discussion between us about how I feel about Trials of Cold Steel, the first 2 games at least, and let you guys know that I'm not going to hold back on this game that much, but at the same time, it's just not going to be like a rant video, nothing. It's just me talking about what I liked and I disliked, and how a newcomer should feel if they were trying to get into the series. Because my friend was on the mark he was semi on the mark about how he described the series to me. So, Trials of Cold Steel. This is a Famicom game, from what I know, and it's part of the Trails series, which has honestly been building on top of each other since the first one. Like, the big thing about the Trails of series is that the stories aren't self-contained by arcs. Even though it makes it seem like that, like the first Trails of game, I think, is it Trails of Skies, the first one? The first few Trails of Skies games do connect to the next arc, and I think there's 2 or 3 other arcs after that one. And this arc is no different, but you don't need to actually play those arcs to actually play this game. And just to let you guys know, before I go too deep into this is going to be, from now on, this is going to only have very, very, very minor spoilers. I can't really talk about how you should play or shouldn't play the game based on just the same generic comments everybody would give on a game that hasn't came out yet. I have to give you a little bit of detail. So it is very minor spoilers and just very vague hints. So if you guys don't want to hear about any of that, please click off this video. But if you do, or you don't really mind, so you guys can get into the series, continue on. But Trials of Cold Steel, they're built on top of each other. They're consistently built on top of each other. They aren't like heavily connected from what I know of. I heard 3 and 4 have more heavier connections to the older games, but my friend says it's not absolutely necessary for you guys to ever play those games. You can still try out the first 2 and continue the 3 and 4, because funny thing, I have 3. I'm playing through 3, but I also have the Japanese version of 4 because I got it on a deal. But this game has a lot. I can tell in the future of this series that there's going to be a lot of it's going to succeed, because from what I saw here, it has a nice building block. This game has a lot of things that most of the big JRPGs do right, but it also has a few things in this game that to me do drive me a little crazy. But I'm just gonna kind of go through the list of just stuff I liked and stuff I didn't like, and just to tell you guys in the end if you guys should try it out and who should try it out. So the first thing I want to talk about is the combat, because in every RPG that can make or break an RPG, because the story could be amazing, but if 80% of the game is combat and the combat isn't at least somewhat enjoyable, you know, it's SOL for you, you know. And I gotta say, the combat for this game is very enjoyable. And this is something I'm going to get into just while I'm talking about the combat, but there's the basic movement of the game, like the basic movement of the characters is a little slow, but thankfully there's a turbo mode which makes your characters move twice as fast. So that's not really an issue, but it is an issue if you just want to play the game, you know, at normal pace without the turbo mode. Turbo mode does make things go a little faster and cutscenes go a little fast, but it is a godsend in the series, and it's basically built to be in the Western releases, and they update the Japanese ones with turbo mode. But on top of that, I feel like the combat is very, 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 and it has a lot of depth to it. It could confuse a few people who are very new to RPGs, I gotta say, because there's some things that I'm like, I'm like, oh my god, like I can barely understand it, or I'll miss a menu that I've been missing the whole game. I'm like, how did I miss this menu? Like, holy crap. But there's a lot of stuff you can do in the combat system, and that's the one thing. And the combat is actually pretty difficult. I mean, some people who are veterans of the series will say it's easy, but there is some moments where it's very hard, and I'm just sitting there like the tactical implications behind like the depth of the system is not obvious right away. That's one thing I gotta say. It's like, I'm like, oh, I didn't know I can do that. I didn't know I can do this. I didn't know I can, you know, resurrect that person that way. There's a lot of that. Or I didn't know that this item could be used it gives you 3 abilities at the same time. So it's a lot in the system. And I really, really recommend it to somebody who's new to RPGs. But the one complaint I do have about the battle system, the one major complaint, is that I'm not a big fan of the boss fights in Cold Steel. And I heard from somebody that the boss fights are actually a little bit better in previous games. Because the boss fights in Cold Steel, I feel there's one thing about the boss fights that really, well, there's two things. It's like, I feel like it has the SMT problem, or the same SMT. It's not really a problem with SMT because you can't avoid it in SMT, but the SMT BS problem, where it's like you'll get into a fight and just depending on how your luck is, the boss will just completely just destroy you with just cheap tactics sometimes. Like sometimes even more cheap tactics than you have, and I'm not a big fan of that, honestly, especially as a newcomer. Maybe somebody who's played the game before can handle it, but if somebody's a newcomer, it does bother me sometimes. The boss battles are really not enjoyable to me that much, because I will fight a boss. There's two things. Number one, the bosses can heal, and the further you go into the game and into the second game, the more they do it, and the harder they do it, and it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with a boss when it's healing. It's like you'll literally do tons of damage, and then the boss will just heal like 25% sometimes. Sometimes it's random. It just decides when the boss decides to do it, and sometimes it's a set amount of times. Like the boss might do it 4 times during the whole battle. So he might have he might be able to heal himself an HP bar equivalent. Sometimes it just gets so annoying, even though you can do some broken things to the boss. You can do some broken things. As I said, people who know what they're doing can really cheese the system. But there's times where I'm just like, the bosses just drive me crazy. I'm just like, especially if you're under leveled, it's just like there's no way you can get through them without like exhausting every resource. And that's what makes the first few hours of the second game, so in a little bit of the first few hours of the third game while I'm on it, it's like, oh my god, why do these bosses heal so hard? Like, if it was just like a 10% or something, I could deal with it. But it's like 25. And I can't handle that. But yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about the movement and combat in general. I'm going to kind of go into the story and how the characters are written and stuff. And the story is very good. It's very good. It has the most world building I've ever seen in any game. I've never seen world building like this. And this is where I said the similarities between this and Kingdom Hearts come up that my friend was talking about. It was like almost every side quest, every detail, every like scene that you can get in the game always carries over to the story in some way, to another side quest later on, to the main story later on. And it's this game is time consuming. It's time consuming if you want to understand everything, even without the extra knowledge from the previous games. Because there'd be like times where there'd be like Mint. There's a character named Mint. She's a side character. She's in the first part of the game. You're in the school, and Mint is one of the side characters that you help out on one of the side quests. Well, the only way Mint is a lot more prevalent in the later, the newer games, but you won't know anything about Mint if you didn't do her side quest in the first game. So Mint will be in the first story, and they'll even talk about the side quest in the later games too. They'd be like, "Oh, remember that time when you helped my uncle fall in love with somebody, yada yada yada." And it's like, if you don't do the side quest, it'll literally be jibber jabber. Like, this game has no mercy to people who don't do most of the stuff in the previous games. And that's a big barrier of entry to me. It's a big barrier of entry. And the funny thing is that this game, if you ever start up this game, the characters in general, like and this is not just the side quest characters, but the main quest characters, like everything about this game, because I'm talking about the characters in general, everything about this game that has any type of story behind it literally comes off very generic anime in the first like hour it's introduced. And it's really weird because the writer does a good job of explaining himself and making it different from everything else I've ever seen. But it's like the first time something's introduced, it's always like, it always comes off generic. And I don't know how to really explain it better, but I'll give you a little bit of a example. So in the very beginning of the first game, I call her Best Girl. Best Girl basically falls on top of the main character, and she basically like this does the anime trope of just putting her body on him by accident. She falls on him all suggestively, whatever, and he, she slaps him, and like, "You idiot," slaps him. And I was like, okay, this is really generic. Like, this is what I probably expected from a game to be, like this. But then as time goes on through the story, like an hour after that happens, like a gameplay, you're like, oh shoot, it's been like a month or a week or two, and she still hasn't forgiven for this. And it's like, but the way it was introduced was so generic, and then they expanded it upon it to make it wasn't a one-off thing, and they still mention it in the story once in a while to this day. And that's interesting to me. It's not this, a lot of stuff is introduced as generic anime tropes, but then it's explained in a way, or expressed in a way, that's so different that you don't even mind. And that's one thing I do like about this game. But at the same time, it does make a lot of things when it comes into the game first, you roll your eyes, you're like, oh my god, this trope. Why is this trope in this game? And then later you're like, oh, wow, they did something really different with this trope that no one's ever done before. And I really like that. And just I guess I could talk about the voice actors while I'm still in the characters. I only did English, and I guess since I have the fourth game, I might have to do the fourth one in Japanese, or unless by the time I get to the fourth game, the English one comes out, just buy that one. But the fourth game is, the voice acting is very, very, very good. It's really good. It has some like really high level voice actors, and some of them are like Rean's voice actor. I don't know if he was that from when the game came out. I think it was 2015 or 14 when the game came out originally, the first one. Rean's voice actor wasn't really that well known, I don't think. And I think now he plays a lot of roles. Like I think he plays Subaru and like ReZero and a few other characters that are really major. He plays a few main characters and a few other people. But I think back then he was kind of like getting his big time start with Cold Steel and a few other games. And I really like his voice actor. It's really he is really good. The English voice cast is really, really good. The whole cast. Like it has the Persona / Fire Emblem levels of English voice acting like prowess. And I really like it. The voice acting is delicious. But now, since I am talking about characters, but now I'm going to switch over to a little bit of story. And this is where some of the comments I made about the characters, like, you know, the generic situations coming up, and then, but having different outcomes and them doing different things. This is where I'm going to kind of like, it kind of goes into the story, but the story has a few problems that I can see that continue on in the Cold Steel series, but I don't really mind. But if you're looking for like a certain experience, I can tell it will irritate you. But it's a lot. But the story is really good. It's really good. Don't get me wrong. But there are some things that could drive some people away from the story if you're a big story person. And I gotta say, the biggest thing that's like, I would say this is the biggest gatekeeper thing about the story, gatekeeping like thing about the story in general, is just the time. Like I said about the side quests and the side characters, it's just the time you have to put into all the different sources and how long the game is in general. The length, because there's times where the dialogue drags on. There's so much detail. It's like you feel like you're living in the world that, you know, you only play like 7 days out of the whole month in the game, but you feel like you actually are living out half the days, like pretty much the whole day with them. And so there's that much dialogue and that much like explanation and that much like, there's just that much stuff in the story, and it could get a little overwhelming depending on how you feel about it, because it doesn't really change in the second game either. It just keeps on going. And sometimes the dialogue, even I, who likes a lot of dialogue, sometimes I like because the world building's insane. But sometimes even I'm like, oh my god, these people are just talking about this. They're talking about taxes. Like they literally talk about like the nation's taxes and how that affects the war, or how that affected the war back in the day, or how that affects how things are just panning out in the story in general. They'll go into that much detail about stuff, and I'm just like, oh my god, please no, god no. But at the same time, it's really interesting. But sometimes it does go on a little long. Like each game feels like it's a chapter or two a little too long because of that. But if you don't mind that, it's really good. This is something about the story in general that I noticed going through pretty much everything I've gone through so far, is that the characters get their asses, because the thing is that these characters are a little bit younger than previous protagonists from what I'm told, so they're learning from the get-go. So, and they're extremely weak compared to some of the most seasoned people in the story and in general. Like pretty much everybody who's in the military in the main story is pretty much stronger than the main characters, because there are a little bit of a power level system, in the story, and I'm just like, they get bailed out so much in the stories. Like, this is something I've noticed that happens a lot in Cold Steel story. The characters will literally be in the toughest situation they can possibly be in, or even the easy, like a situation that's a little bit over the top that they can't really handle, and literally they'll get bailed out by anybody. They're pretty much sure that it happens so much that I think almost every character that's older than our cast has bailed out our characters at some point in a battle, in a boss battle, in a mini battle. Like, it'd be like, oh shoot, our back's against the wall. Let us get serious, or let us fight to the death. And then like a main, like, senior character will come up, like your teacher will come out, and he'd be like, oh, did I come here too late? I'm going here to fight with you, and I'm going to, like, add to your power. And it literally happens so much. And it's a big trend of getting your ass saved in the story. Just like, there's not a lot of, like, there's a lot of stakes, but there's a lot of, like, you almost know somebody's going to kind of bail you out. And you're right 90% of the time. If things get too hairy. And you're not saying that the characters that help them are safe or anything. I'm just saying that the main cast does get bailed out a lot, like the main students. But yeah, overall though, I gotta say, it's just the experience behind the story is really nice. It's really nice. The one thing though I gotta say about everything though is, everything is great, but it does rely on anime a lot. Like, a lot. Like, I want to express that it relies on anime tropes a lot. Unlike a lot of video games that try to rely a little bit more on, reality stuff a little bit more, it does rely on a lot of video game tropes. Anime tropes. A lot more than people realize, even more, regular RPGs do. So, just want to express that. But yeah, overall, it's a really nice experience. I gotta say, on a technical aspect, I played these games on the PS4, and I heard this is the versions that people really, really, really expect people to play on. The PS4 versions. They said the one on Steam is good, but the turbo mode is a little not as good on the Steam version. But it's technically, the first two games are very, like I said, looks like Persona, and there are some frame rate dips, which is weird, because it must have been because something about it transferred from the PS Vita to the PlayStation 4. There's a few frame drops here and there, or there's frames that stutter. You could tell, because, like, especially when there's a lot of characters on screen, it's like, it'll just, like, the game will, like, you just see it, and it's not a big deal because it's never during anything important, but there is a lot of, like, frame rate stuff sometimes, and a lot of weird stuff, and the graphics for the first two games are not that good, and it's not that good at all, honestly. But it reminds me of PS2 game, the first two games, but it makes sense since it's on PS Vita. But overall, I gotta say, I really like this experience. I wouldn't really recommend this game unless you have at least watched most anime, because there's a lot of tropes in this series. Like, there's pretty much every type of trope or, like, story plot line that has ever been in a major anime is in this game. So, or in this franchise in general, honestly. So if you haven't watched at least, like, FMA and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, or you haven't watched, like, Code Geass, or a few of the major ones, a lot of this game probably isn't really for you, because it is a lot more anime than, I can't express it enough. It's a lot more anime than you think it is. And I think as going forward, the quality of the games are going to increase, because even the third one is really nice. But I think unless you are a big JRPG fan and have watched a little bit of anime, I wouldn't recommend this series to you, because or I don't have a lot of time. That's another thing. Because overall, it's a really nice game and it's a really nice franchise. But if you don't have the time, or don't like understand the tropes in it, or you don't understand like why the plot line's going in these directions, because of just how the game is, I think you're not gonna like this game that much. But if you're okay with all that stuff, or you want to wait into later installments, because I heard in later installments after the game after the fourth one that's coming out in the US, so not the fourth one, but the one after the fourth one, they're going to start doing action time, like a combination between action RPGs and regular RPGs. That's probably a good time to start playing this series. But if you're okay with a lot of the stuff I said in this video, please pick this series up, because it's really nice, really tedious, but really nice. I hope this made a lot of sense. I try to do this a little bit different format than I usually do it. This is a lot more just talking about points instead of going into deep detail. I probably went into deep detail anyway. But I really appreciate you guys clicking on this video. Hit with a like or a dislike. It doesn't matter which one. If I got something completely wrong because I'm new to this series, please tell me, because I don't like giving out false information if I can help it. But I hope I see you guys next video and our stream. Bye-bye. 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 Now, it's time to see my favorite cutscene so far in the series.
Come on, that would put a spring in any man's step. I don't blame you for sneaking out alone.
Oh! No! It's not like I knew she was going to show up wearing a cocktail dress. I swear!
You seemed pretty taken by her when she showed up yesterday, though. And your eyes were glued to her right up until she left the scene. Oh, really?
So while we were enjoying a quiet evening, you were out carousing with a beautiful woman, were you? You lucky son of for shame, Rean! We're here representing the Academy on a field study!
I swear, you guys are just making things up at this point.
I believe